Hey guys, Destiny Gold back for another video. Today we are back with an exotic review. Today we have the Monte Carlo. It is one of my favorite auto rifles in the game, especially for PvE. But before we get into any of the reasons I love this weapon, let's quickly go over the stats. The attack is going to start at 260 and max out at 331 if you've gotten it post DLC, so you're going to be maxing out at 331 damage. It is a kinetic damage rifle, so it's not going to have any elemental affinity to it. That kind of sucks, but it's alright. Now we're going to go into the hard stats. The rate of fire is 88. This thing absolutely bullet hoses. It spews bullets, and you'll see that when using it. The impact is 8, so fairly low, but we'll make up for that with the rate of fire and the very low stability. The range is 46. The stability is really solid. It's at 55, so the stability is really good. There's almost no recoil on this weapon, and it gets better. The reload is 79, so that's really solid as well. You're going to have a really fast reload on this weapon, and you have a base magazine of 36, so a very solid magazine size as well. Now, quickly going into the perks here. CQB Ballistics is the very first one that you start with. I don't actually care for this one as much. I don't really use it for anything. It has greatly reduced recoil and significant penalty to range, and you will feel that. I do not like using it. Not my favorite. Now, for PvP, I really like using the Smart Drift Control because it really makes it easy to land a lot of shots and have pretty much no recoil. You do have a small penalty to range, but I don't think it's that big of a deal in PvP since most of your encounters are fairly close hand. Next up, and your last one that you have for your barrels that you can put on is the Aggressive Ballistics. You have more predictable recoil and enhanced impact. You have shorter range and more recoil. I prefer this for PvE where it's easier to land shots and you don't have to aim for the head quite as aggressively as you might with PvP to make those shots hit. Hip Fire is the next perk you're going to unlock, and I like using this in PvE because I don't always have time to scope in, or even if I do, I don't always want to because they're right up in my face, and I'm not trying to slow down my walking, so Hip Fire is really nice, and you do have quite a bit of accuracy when firing from the hip once you unlock this perk, so it's one that I like using actually, and I think it's a very nice asset of this weapon, for a couple of other reasons we'll get to in a minute. Then you have your upgrade for damage. Ooh, that's special. And after that, you have high caliber rounds. Oversized rounds built to stagger targets. Now, I like having this on PvE because it makes it very, very easy to stagger larger targets. This weapon, like I mentioned earlier, only has an impact of 8. That's pretty low, so you can't exactly do too much damage too quickly to stagger them naturally. So it's a lot better if you have these high caliber rounds. You can stagger them much easier. You do have a little more recoil, but it's alright. I think it's actually a pretty good perk to have, especially for PvE if you're using this on against higher level enemies. I think it helps out a lot. Now, Send It is the one that I typically like to use if you're in PvP. However, I like it just as much as the final perk, Field Scout. Both of them are pretty interchangeable to me, depending on the map I'm playing. If I'm playing a relatively small map and I know I'm going to have a lot of encounters really quickly, I'm going to use Field Scout because the range and the accuracy isn't going to matter as much as having all those extra shots to take on multiple enemies at once. The base magazine of 36 is solid, and you can probably kill 2 people with it if you're really solid with your shots and getting those headshots, but Field Scout can make sure that you'll get 2, if not 3 people with that magazine, so I have never really had too much issue getting a lot of kills once I have Field Scout on. Now, if it's a longer range map, or even a medium range one, I'm more likely going to use Send It to increase the range and accuracy, and do more damage per the distance that I'm shooting the weapon. Next up is the perk everybody loves, the Monte Carlo method. Now, I have to say this is one of my favorite perks in the entire game. Obviously, it's exclusive to this weapon, the Monte Carlo. Dealing damage with this weapon reduces your melee cooldown and grants a chance to fully charge your melee ability with each kill. So, just to break that down, for every shot you land with this weapon, it refills your melee about double as much as it would if you were just letting it charge normally. So, like, for every shot you land, you're going to double that charge that you would have for that short amount of time, and I think that works really, really well with this weapon, especially if you are doing a warlock or a hunter melee build. So if you're a hunter, obviously, you're going to have 2 throwing knives on your melee build, probably, or you're going to have blink strike, which is really nice as well. I think that's really, really solid on a weapon like this. It lets you get off those throwing knives in PvP very, very easily, and I like that. That is really nice, especially if you have the burn damage. You can get that burn damage on them twice, at least much quicker than you would otherwise, having to wait for it to charge back up. But it also means that in PvE, when you land a kill, because obviously you're going to get a lot more kills in PvE than PvP, at least we would hope, you're going to be getting your throwing knife or your melee or your Titan punch or whatever you're using back quite a bit more often, and you're going to have a lot more chances to use your melee. So if you're using a melee build, this is basically, like if you have bad juju for your super build, you have Monte Carlo for your melee build. This weapon is indispensable for a melee build, and I can't think of too many other weapons I would want to have instead of this one if I was running one of those. After that, you simply have your 4 damage upgrades. Overall, I think this weapon performs really, really well in PvE. especially as a support weapon. If you're running something solo, you're probably going to do fine, but you don't usually run a melee build if you're running something completely solo. At that point, you probably want to be running a super build to wipe out a lot of enemies quickly. However, if you're working with a group in a strike or a raid, this weapon performs very, very well. I like using it as a support weapon, so that's my personal opinion with PvE. I give it a solid 8 of 10. It's a very solid weapon. The melee is what really makes it, the melee perk there, but there are other weapons that you can use that have a higher rate of fire per the damage that you get, so your DPS is going to be higher. I'm not going to say this thing has the highest DPS, but it has very, very low recoil, which is nice, and the reload is solid, so you're going to get a lot of your bullets out. They're just not going to individually do too much damage. If you're looking for a weapon that performs similarly, I suggest going and looking for up for anything as far as for basic just weapon performance. Now in PvP, I don't find this weapon as quite as solid because it takes a lot of shots with that 8 impact. That is really the downfall of this weapon. The rate of fire is good, and there isn't too much of a difference between headshots and non-headshots. You're looking at like 16 to 18 damage, especially if you're playing Iron Banner at ranges, so if you're looking for that in PvP, expect like 16 to 18 damage, and the critical shots to do between 18 and 22 depending on whether you're playing Iron Banner or not. So personally, I don't find that since there's not that big of a difference between the amount of damage you're doing with a critical, it's not necessarily worth the time. So overall, I have to give this thing about a 6.5 on the PvP. So it's a really solid weapon, not bad, but you could do a lot better in PvP. Overall, I really love this weapon. Thank you guys for watching. Leave your own opinions below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Destiny Gold, out.